Good afternoon.
Hello.
I'm here with Marianna Habisreutinger, the South Carolina Mother of the Year from 2011. It is an honor to be here with you today. I want to thank you so much for giving us your time and participating in our oral history project.
Well, I am delighted to be here, share some of my experiences, and that you all remember that all these mothers have existed over the many, many years, and that you want to archive
Absolutely.
the history. I think it's wonderful.
Thank you so much. We're very excited about this project and just so happy to be here with you today. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about when and where you were born and raised?
Well, I was born right here in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I have never lived anywhere but here. And people often think that because I have such an unusual last name that I have lived in Europe. My husband's Swiss, he's from the German-speaking part of Switzerland, but we've always lived here. And as I said earlier, I was born, reared here, and other than going off to college, I've always been here.
Wow.
I've traveled a lot, but I've always had this as home.
Tell us a little bit about your family and your early childhood experiences.
My family was, those that are not with us anymore and those that are still with us anymore, are the most wonderful people, and I have been so, so greatly blessed to be born and reared by those who have influenced my life. And I think I am what I am because of those people, and continue to be what I am today because of those loving, caring people that are surrounding me today, such as my husband and my children and cousins and my sister, her family. So I've just been a very, very blessed person.
That's beautiful. Do you tell me about your younger years, brothers and sisters, and your family growing up?
I have one sister. She's 2 years younger than I, but she skipped the second grade, and I love to say that I taught her everything I knew, so she got to skip a grade, but that's not true. But she's a wonderful person, and we live about 3 minutes apart.
Great.
And our daughter lives about 3 minutes away from my husband and me. And then our two boys live here in town too. So we all live very close to each other, and a very, very, very close-knit family. And I do not have any brothers, so I've learned a lot having two sons and a daughter. So we feel very fortunate to have both.
That's wonderful. Tell us about your education and your young adult life, and also during that time in your life, reflecting back, what your dreams, goals, and aspirations were as a young woman.
Well, what do I start with
Start
first?
with your education.
And my education.
Start with your education.
I went through church kindergarten. When I came along, public schools didn't have kindergarten. Then I started the public schools in the first grade and graduated from Spartanburg High School. Then I went to a small girls' college in Washington, D.C. called Mount Vernon Junior College. It has since been acquired by George Washington University. And then, since that was a 2-year college at the time, I transferred as a junior to the University of Mississippi because my roommate at Mount Vernon was from Mississippi, and I visited her. During those 2 years we were in college in D.C. and loved Mississippi. And even though Ole Miss was is a university, it's not a huge university.
Right.
So I feel like I had the great setting of a small girls' school with like 150 boarders and maybe 50 day students. And then I transferred to a school at that time had like 3,000 students.
Wow.
At Ole Miss. So I feel like I had the smaller and then the larger situation educationally.
That's great.
And then I had a few graduate courses. I took from time to time during my 3 years of teaching school, but I never pursued a higher degree.
When you taught school, where did you teach?
Locally here,
Okay.
one of the school districts. Spartanburg has 7 school districts, which is rather unusual. Like Greenville is all one school district, Spartanburg has 7. So thus we have 7 bus departments, 7 superintendents, 7 everything.
Wow.
So it's kind of an interesting concept.
So, as a young adult woman, when you reflect back, what do you remember were your dreams, goals, and aspirations?
Well, just to be the best person I could be and carry on the values and traditions that I had been so fortunate to be influenced by all through my life. My parents were both from this area, and both my mother's family and my father's family immigrated from Ireland and Scotland in the early 1700s. So we are long-term Spartanburg, where you'd say upstate families, or up-country families, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And they were very strong, giving people, and they were predominantly, of course, in the early years, farmers and physicians. My grandfather Black graduated from the University of Maryland in 1880.
Wow.
So, and he came to Welford, South Carolina, because he heard that there was not a doctor in that part of the Spartanburg County. And there he met my grandmother Black.
Wow.
And her maiden name was Snoddy, Snoddy. So she was Mary Snoddy and married Hugh Black. And my mother's family was all from here. So anyway, they were agricultural and physician careers in both families.
Right.
And that meant caring for people and giving to people. And I think, like, when you're a doctor, you have to listen to people. So I was taught very early, listen, Marianna, listen.
Right.
You can learn a lot by listening. So all of those are values I've tried to convey to my children, and or in any group in which I've worked, like teaching school, or many of the volunteer jobs that I've had over the years have been with young people, and I've tried to convey those too.
And your family has given quite a bit back to the community. That's my understanding, right? There's a hospital named after
My grandmother.
your grandmother. That's
Yeah, my
wonderful.
grandfather started that hospital in 1925,
Wow.
but he had a couple of smaller hospitals before that, and my father was the only boy in his family that was not a doctor, and he was an orchardist. He brought the first national convention to the state of South Carolina, which was the National Peach Council in 1953. And our Memorial Auditorium had just been built by then. So 400 people came from all over the country, because peaches are grown in many, many states.
Great. Tell us about how you met your husband.
Do you really want to know?
Yes, we do.
His story or my story? I'm teasing. There's a real story, and his story is a joke story. But I was quite fond of a young man who worked for one of the big textile companies here, and he was sent to meet a Swiss man at the Spartanburg Greenville airport. And it was a Sunday night, and he said, Marianna, I've got to meet this Swiss fella who was coming to Spartanburg to work for 6 months at one of the textile mills here, and then go to Danville, Virginia and work. at Dan River Mills there, and then returned to Switzerland and run his family's textile mills. Well, I met him at the airport, and we took him out for dinner and set him up for the night. And then the next day he went to work. I went to meet the people with whom he was going to work, and it seemed like everybody he met knew me and introduced him to a lovely family here in Spartanburg who have a beautiful colonial home. And the original kitchen was detached from the house, and it was then an apartment, which it still is today. And he had the opportunity to live there. And all these people were friends of my family's. So everybody Roger met basically knew me. And he absolutely loved the American way of life. He said, I'm going to be in the USA a short time, so I don't want to try to make my days in Spartanburg or in Danville, Virginia, Switzerland. I want to experience America. And he loved it so much, and the relaxing manner of business and the friendliness and informality of meeting and greeting people. And he's just stayed here. Other than going back to Switzerland and doing his military duty before we got married, because the Swiss has a whole different military system. And he's been living here. And he's is and has been for a long, long time now a U.S. citizen. And I tell him so often, if everybody was as good a citizen to this country as he is, this country would have no problems.
That's right. That's great. So talk to us a little bit about the early years of your marriage and the birth of your children.
All right. We were married almost 5 years before we had any children. At that time, I was working with my father. I had quit teaching school, and I was working in my father's office, which was less agriculture in those days, but more into the real estate development business, which is what my husband does today, and one of my sons. And so that's carrying on family tradition. And Roger and I were free to come and go and do a lot of traveling, and that was delightful time to kind of just be able to shut the door and walk out, and we didn't have a cat or a dog or a fish or anything. So we were free to come and go and kind of see the USA, and we went back and forth to Switzerland quite a bit because he remained on his family's board of directors. So I got to spend a lot of time in Switzerland, and we had the opportunity to take a week extra and go somewhere in Europe. So,
That's great.
and I think travel is a great part of one's education.
Absolutely.
And my family, when my sister and I were growing up, had the opportunity to travel a lot because my father had two sisters, one who never married and the other whose husband passed away when I was like 9 years old. So those two aunts took my sister and me somewhere in the world every summer for, about 15 years.
Wow, that's great.
So I equate travel and seeing the world and observing people in action and places as equally important as the books.
It's a great form of education.
Mhm.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
It's wonderful that you and your husband had that time.
It's just like going from China, and this is, say, 15 years ago, into India, and you saw the grayness of the clothing the Chinese were wearing at that time. I think since then things have brightened up. And then going to India, and you see all the gorgeous saris that the women wear of beautiful colors.
Right,
And it's just a happiness
right,
that radiates, even though there's so much poverty.
right.
But anyway, Roger and I have felt it very important that we expose our children to as much travel as possible.
That's
and they appreciate that.
So tell us a little bit about your children.
Well, our daughter's the eldest, and then we have a son, and then another son. And they all are, Anna and Paula, almost 2 years to the day apart. And then Charles came 3.5 years after our son. And they're all each other's best friends. And my sister has two sons who are 2 years apart. And they are like 8 and 10 years older than my children. But they are all like best buddies.
That's great.
So these 5 grandchildren of my parents are really like siblings and best friends.
That's beautiful. And do they all live close? And
Yes,
what kind of work do they
we
do?
all live right around here.
That's great.
And our office today, when I say our, I mean my husband, I have an office there. And my 3 children have offices in the house in which I grew up in.
Wow.
Because I love that old house. And it's just a USA Main Street, red brick house. And it's so much fun to go in the office sometimes. And we made the dining room our conference room. And I'll see the 3 children. They're still my children, even though they're old. Sitting, because they do some projects together. Mm-hmm. Our daughter has her own design business, Habis Designs, but she only does health care, wow. Like nursing homes. She just did a hospice house up in Landrum. She's done several churches. She renovated the foundation building at the South Carolina School for Deaf and Blind. Wow. So she's into that kind of decorating. And which is totally different from making a beautiful sofa and lamps and curtains and all in a lady's home.
Right.
You know, you've got the visual and the handicap doings and meet all the federal rules and regulations for public buildings. And then our older son has his own construction company, and that's called H General Construction, and then the younger boy works with us in our Champion Investment Company.
Wow. You must be very proud.
I am very proud. We are so happy. Everybody loves everybody, and everybody gets along.
That's so great.
And my father used to say, Marianna, let me tell you something. Family members have to kind of love each other, but they don't necessarily have to like each other. And when you can love each other and you like each other, that's perfect. And it's true.
That is perfect.
Think about loving and liking.
That's right. That's wonderful. It's summed up very nicely. You've talked about some of these activities, but I want to give you a chance if there's anything else you want to share, activities that you were involved in. Could be before, could be after you were married, in terms of family, community, employment, education. Anything else you want to share about activities that you were involved in, maybe that helped you in terms of your selection of being named Mother of the Year?
Well, I've told you about all my education, about my family.
Community, employment.
Yeah, I've told you about mine.
Is there anything else?
So basically it would be my volunteerism, because I really haven't spoken to that. And the reason I was nominated for Mother of the Year was because I founded the foundation at the Charles Lee Center, which is a facility for special needs people.
Wow.
Go through life and can care for people with all sorts of disabilities.
That's wonderful.
From those who are nonverbal, children, adults, those who live in group homes. We have way over 50 homes that are group homes, and there are a few homes where the constituents, we call them constituents, can live independently, but most of the homes have like a house mother or a house father to them. And then the Charles Lee Center has a wonderful workability program where people who are educable to a degree can go and work or be trained to work in this workability building, or they can go to work sites, like, say, your company or a restaurant here. I saw a young lady who was cleaning tables the other day, and she's a constituent at the Charles Lee Center. And so, anyway, the Charles Lee Center Foundation nominated me because the not-for-profit has to nominate the candidates for the Mother of the Year. So I was very honored and flabbergasted when I got a phone call that the Charles Lee Center Foundation was hoping to nominate me. And I was so thrilled and flattered and said, yes, yes, yes. But I had to work because I had to go back through my life. It made me organize my life and look and see what I had done over the many, many years. But it boils down to basically health care or access to health, higher education, or the arts. I've done a lot with the ballet, the little theater, the Artist Guild, the art organizations, but also with healthcare. Like I've been on the board here for the Cancer Association of Spartanburg and Cherokee counties for years and years and years, as well as the St. Luke's Free Medical Clinic. I was on the board of trustees of the Mayor Black Hospital for 20 years, and the Mayor Black Foundation, which had to leave the hospital when the hospital sold in 1996. It was no longer a eleemosynary institution. It sold to a public corporation. So the foundation had to leave the hospital and reconfigure its mission for wellness and active living. So that's how the funds are involved in initiatives around Spartanburg in those two arenas of life.
That's great.
So, and then I've been on the Spartanburg Community Foundation, which we call the Spartanburg County Foundation, and that work is more limited in what the trustees can do with the resources, because there's trustee funds that the trustees can distribute to various requests for funds, but there are also donor advised funds from individuals or organizations house their funds there, and all the funds are invested together so they reap more benefit.
Right.
And so it's I've had a wonderful I've had a great education through my community.
Wow.
I've had education that the books could never have taught me. And the beautiful thing about volunteering in different arenas is that I have so many good friends that I would never have known otherwise. And that's a treasure, because I am a person who loves people. People, you know, the leaves on those trees are gorgeous, and the flowers are gorgeous, and the furniture and our surroundings are beautiful, but people are the ones with the personalities.
That's right. That's right. Well
So,
said. Let me ask you this. What does motherhood mean to you?
motherhood means a tremendous blessing that I've had that opportunity. And it means that I have a huge responsibility in carrying on and conveying the values in which I've been blessed to have growing up. And that's motherhood to me.
That's beautiful. You mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to ask you again. What did it mean to you to be named the South Carolina Mother of the Year in 2011?
It meant that I was absolutely thrilled and overwhelmed and flabbergasted, but it also validated that obviously the lovely committee that picked me out thought highly of what I had been involved in through the years.
Mm-hmm.
It was just validated my life.
That's beautiful. Tell us about that year as Mother of the Year. The
It was
kinds of
marvelous.
activities you were involved in. Yeah.
It was marvelous. And I cannot tell you one specific incident other than the entire year was beautiful. I think maybe they could have used me more to maybe advocate for some female issues or children's issues more than I was then. But anyway, I loved it. It was just great. And I felt very, very, very proud to stand up there in Salt Lake City, Utah, and say I represent the state of smiling faces and beautiful places. You know, that's our license plate.
Exactly. That's beautiful.
On the back of our license plate.
So that's when you went to the National Mother of the Year.
Yep, award.
award
And gave that.
ceremony.
Actually, it's in my speech.
We'd like to hear you give that speech. Would you like to give it now?
I'll give it anytime you wish
Let's
for
hear
me
it
to
now,
give.
because we're thinking about your winning year as Mother of the Year. And
Okay.
you gave this speech when you were there in Utah?
Every mother was required to give a speech.
Wow.
And I took my speech, and the theme of the speeches that year was to elevate yourself and your community. And so I inherited, my sister and I did, a huge collection of quilts that had been made by my grandmother Black's family members over a period of 75 to 80 years. And my sister and I framed 16 of these quilts, and 9 of them are in this little booklet here. This little booklet. And they are hanging in the Mayor Black Foundation because, I mean, they're as big as this wall. You know how big a quilt is.
Yes.
And each quilt has a little note on it about whose shirt tail or skirt tail or what kind of fabric it came from, or who maybe Aunt Meg stitched with the help of Grandma or something like that. So I interwove the idea of quilting into my speech. And so I will read my speech, and I will put on these glasses since I haven't read this speech in a while. After being selected the South Carolina Mother of the Year, the state of smiling faces and beautiful places, I learned that years ago, for the Mother of the Year, state mothers were asked to quilt a quilt or to provide a quilt. And how many of you here today are glad you did not have to quilt a quilt? I certainly am, because I do not quilt. Still, I am blessed by the legacy of quilting. My grandmother, Mary Snoddy Black, preserved quilts that she had been given, and those that she and other relatives made over a period of 75 years or more. 16 of those quilts now hang framed in the Mary Black Foundation. In considering today's talk, I realize that a quilt is a marvelous metaphor, made lovingly by hand, from scraps of material, fashioned as gifts, preserved as markers of special occasions. Quilts represent a womanly art that is as warm and nurturing as it is beautiful and useful. The feminine art of quilting symbolizes the many ways mothers celebrate and elevate our children and our families. By marking the milestones that matter most, a wedding, a birth of a child, quilts like mothers memorialize the importance of family life. By handing them down, our mothers and grandmothers connect us to the past and remind us to do the same fine handiwork with our children and with our families. What we give to our children, we give families everywhere. The precious and sacred beings that are our children, and all children, magnify every investment we make in them as they step forward in their public lives. I taught my children what my family taught me, to be servants for their families and by extension to their communities. As I fulfilled community commitments, including my work to support children and adults with disabilities and special needs through the Charles Lee Center Foundation, I often took my children with me. They spent hours watching, doing, learning. I wanted them to understand one important thing, that they and my family were more important to me than I. So, fellow mothers, perhaps we have quilted and crafted a quilt after all. Because, wouldn't you agree that the threads of our love and values stitch together families, schools, churches, communities, and ultimately our world? Our children and our families are the quilts that we patch and the beautiful homespun legacy that we pass along. Congratulations to you, fellow quilters.
Wow. That is beautiful.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I was real proud of it. I don't mean to be tooting my own horn, but I heard so many mothers from all over the country give their talks. And most of them revolved around particular situations just in their own lives.
Right.
Maybe with a disabled child, which you have great empathy for. But I felt like this included the community, it included my family, it included the past, it included the future hopes.
Yes.
So, anyway.
It's perfect. I mean,
I didn't win, but I do think it was one of the top 3 speeches.
It's a beautiful summary of everything you've just said, of kind of what the Mother of the Year is about. And what this project is about, having this intergenerational conversation among women, looking to our past, looking to our future, and thinking exactly what you said, take the values of the family and then expand them into the community, and to think about, what the world might look like or should look like when we do that. It's the speech that you wrote is actually a beautiful segue. The first half of the interview, we wanted to hear about you personally. And the second half of the interview, we want to ask you your thoughts about some larger societal issues.
Well,
so that's a beautiful segue, I think, to link the two.
Okay, great.
So let me ask you a few more questions that kind of go to that larger level. What do you think are the most important issues facing women today?
Oh, gracious. One, I think very much one question is the feminist movement in this country. Well, I think what feminism really means is equal quality for men and for women in every way. In so many countries, that is not true. Not true at all. And that, I think, women need to speak up for their rights if you look at the big national companies, so many of the corporations have a very small percentage of female CEOs. And so many of the women up in higher ranks still make less money than the men and can be just as well educated. Now, I think the IT world out in California and all, that's kind of the hub of the IT world, I guess, in today's time.
Right.
That may be more equalized. But I think that, and then I think domestic violence, which involves not only adults but children. And I've been very involved here with the Children's Advocacy Center, and that is domestic violence or just violence and sexual or physical or mental abuse for children. And one of my sons, my youngest, is chairman of the board of the Children's Advocacy Center now, which I'm very proud of that. But we don't need any domestic violence in the world. And you look around the world, in so many countries, you know, the male is the king. The woman is just, you know, kind of the bottom rail on the ladder.
That's so important. Equal pay for equal work, equal opportunities, trying to fight violence against women and children. I think you've hit some of the most important issues that women globally are
Globally,
in this country,
not only
and globally
here,
are struggling with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you think women's work and women's roles as mothers have been adequately recognized by society?
In our society, it has more than in other societies. Now, we have many societies within our society. So, I think in the world in which you live and I live, that's more recognized and equalized, and but I'm not sure about. We have so many nationalities that have come here over the last 20 years or more. I don't think that's equally recognized. They have a lot of traditions that will still take a couple of generations. I don't know if you say lose what they brought with them from whatever country they came, but a lot of the communities stick really together of the different ethnic groups.
And sometimes, I think what I hear you saying is sometimes those nationalities or ethnicities may bring a traditional view of women that may not adequately recognize the role of women's work and women's
That's
roles as
right,
mothers.
exactly. That's what I was trying to say, but not very well.
I think it's, you know, I think there are probably a lot of variables that can impact
Yes.
whether or not one values motherhood. And a lot of it has to do with your upbringing, how you were raised.
Yes.
Right? Within different families, different regions of the country, different...
Exactly.
You know, there could be lots of variables that impact that. I think that's
Absolutely.
a good point. I like how you said there are many societies within our society.
There are
It's
many
complicated.
societies within our society.
One of the things that women often struggle with is this idea of balance. Balancing work outside the home with work inside the home. And that could be paid work for a job if husbands and wives both have to work for a living. It could be volunteerism, community service. How were you able to balance? You raised 3 children. You've been very active in your community. How were you able to balance work inside and outside the home? And how do you think women today are able to balance those things?
Well, when I had my children, I was free to come in and out of my office as it suited me or as I was needed. So I didn't have to be there all the time. And that allowed me a lot of opportunity to be a chauffeur for my children and attend ball games and plays and all that. And it also allowed me the opportunity to volunteer a lot. And it also allowed me the opportunity to travel with my husband because we were blessed with some help. Even my parents, I can remember going to Switzerland when our daughter was 6 months old, and I felt perfectly happy about it. She was 6 weeks old.
Wow.
But she was with my mother, my father, an aunt, and some other help that came in to help. And she was better off with them than she was with me. But when I called home and she didn't make a sound, and I said, "Well, pinch her. I want to hear her." And I had to pinch her to make a little squeak or cry.
Right.
But I've been allowed the opportunity to be involved in the community a lot more because I think I did not have just a full-time job. And my husband was proud of the things I did, and I felt like it was a strong way of exposing my children to my beliefs in caring for others, doing for others,
Right.
sharing your talents,
Right.
all the things that I had been reared to believe.
That's so important.
Mm-hmm.
And you also spoke to that support network of family
Yes.
that enables women to be able to balance all these things when you have that type of support network.
Yes.
Think about how single parents, the difficulties when you don't have a strong family support network around
Exactly.
you that can help. It's much
Exactly.
harder.
Exactly. And unfortunately today there's more of that, I think, than when I was in my young motherhood years. And I think that's a difficult, going back to the problems of women today, particularly in this country. We have a lot of single households. And I just think it's a very healthy situation for children if they can have a father and a mother.
Of course, poverty is
Mhm.
another limitation, and if there's one income earner versus two, that also
right.
can lead to class inequality in terms of what women
Yeah.
and men are able to balance and able to achieve in their families
That's right.
and their communities.
And today, I think we have a lot more daycare situations that are offered to these single parents, because there are a lot of men single parents,
Mm-hmm.
than when my children came along.
Mm-hmm.
There was kindergarten, but for the most part, they dismissed at noon. The full day school kindergarten
Right.
programs and all didn't exist at all.
Right. The shift, half day to full day. You mentioned this earlier as well. You predicted my question. What does feminism mean to you?
It means equal opportunities for men and for women.
Do you consider yourself a feminist?
Well, yeah, because I believe in equal opportunities for women and for men.
It seems so obvious.
I know.
Is there anything else you would like to share with us? Any questions you have with us, or anything you'd like to share about your experience, your amazing experience as a South Carolina mother
those
figure?
opportunities equally for men and women ought to include rights, everything that you, voting rights, whatever, just everything equal for men and women. That some countries, women aren't even allowed to have a driver's license over in the Arab world.
Right.
So,
You feel a strong commitment to equality in all spheres for
Yes.
women and men.
yes, absolutely.
I imagine that people who may not consider themselves feminists, if you have a daughter It
Yeah.
seems to me you want the same opportunities for your daughter as you do for your son.
Absolutely.
That helps bring women and men toward feminism, having a daughter and wanting them to have a world
I think
of
the word
opportunity.
feminism hasn't always been understood.
I agree.
But I hope that it's being more understood as being equal for men and women.
I agree. Equal opportunities for men and for women.
Mm-hmm. For men and for women. Well, I've had a wonderful time being interviewed.
Well, we've had a wonderful time interviewing you.
And I hope to see all of this in a final form.
We look forward to sharing that with you. And I just want to congratulate you again on your 2011 Mother of the Year award.
Well, it was certainly an honor and a privilege. And I feel like I have the most beautiful, wonderful state to have represented. And very thankful for the opportunity.
I also want to thank you for all of the advocacy work that you have done on behalf of access to health care and people with disabilities and special needs, children and adults. You've been a great advocate for very many causes in our state and in our nation, and we just want to thank you for all that you've done while raising 3 very successful children.
And they're taking a great interest in their community. Like I said, one of my sons is chair of the Children's Advocacy Center. Another is on the board of the Free Medical Clinic. I don't want to say my, because my husband always says, well, she's mine too, or he's mine too. Our daughter is chairman of the board of the South Carolina School Deaf and Blind Walker Foundation, and she's a trustee at Converse College, and she's a trustee on the Mary Black Foundation. So I do think I have instilled in them. And my husband's been a great community volunteer since he's been here. And that's not a European trait. Because just the way the government situation is in many European countries. But I think they're taking their community seriously and wanting to do what they can for it.
I think you've taught them how to take it seriously. And I can't wait to tell my sister. My sister's a quilter, and she loves kind of the history of quilting and the metaphor that you've described. I want to bring her down to the Mary Black Foundation.
Please
so she can see
do.
the
Where is
quilts.
your sister?
I'm from Maryland originally, so she's in Maryland.
Oh, she's in Maryland.
But the next time they come to visit, we visit each other a lot. I'm the youngest of 3, and my family's very close. So the next time they come to visit, we're going to come to the Mary Black Foundation and look
Well,
at those
call me
quilts.
and you all can have lunch
I
with
will.
me. And
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
I'll tell you what, I have more of these at home. I will.
And we definitely want you to share any and all of your documents, binders, paperwork that you have with the Louise Pettis Archives as well.
This was stuck on here.
You're so kind.
Gracious. I can put another one of mine in here. Just trying not
Well,
to.
you're so kind. Thank you so much.
Now.
Thank you.
And that has a little thing on it
That's
that I've had put on there to give out at the thing. And I'm sorry I only have that one.
The National Association told you couldn't give it out because not every state mother was giving something out. Was
No
that
other
the
mother had
argument?
anything to give out.
Right.
But I thought I was supposed to take a favor. I don't know how I got that notion in my head,
Well,
but somebody must have given me the notion.
I think you
But-
you reflected South Carolina culture well by coming with something to give out to everybody. That's very
Well, I mailed it to everybody that was there, including the board and all the people that were there.
That's wonderful. Any final questions for us, or thoughts, or comments? Anything else you'd like to share?
Well, no, I'm sure you've learned all about the South Carolina mothers through Ann, and she certainly knows all about it.
And Martha Cranford and Shirley Fishburne have taught me, when they first brought me into this project, they've taught me a lot about the Mothers Association and the committee, and the committee members have formed such a strong bond.
Yes.
In reading applications of women like you and making those tough decisions and making those selections, they've really formed a bond with each other. So it's a wonderful, wonderful
Well,
thing.
and I've made so many friends. You know, like I've known Ann all her life.
What was it like going to the governor's mansion? Did you have a tea in the governor's mansion?
Yes, and it was gorgeous.
Was it wonderful?
And they allowed me to invite all I wanted.
That's great. That's such a wonderful
So there were
tradition.
over 200 people that came to the tea.
That's great. Tea for 200.
Hmm. And that was lovely. And they presented me with wonderful proclamations in the State House.
That's wonderful.
And you can pull it up on the internet and
I think
see
that's
it.
something South Carolina has done uniquely. I don't think the other states have done that for their state mothers. So that's something else we're very proud of.
Yes.
Yes,
In
they-
fact, I know a lot of the states did not do anything for their mothers. But one mother, I can't remember, she was from Oregon but she was from one of those northwestern states. She said she was in every parade in every town in the state, she felt like. Every Christmas parade, every Veterans Day parade, every parade they put her in. Well, they never put me in a parade.
So it's interesting. States have different ways that they recognize their state mothers. Thank you so much.